thank you so much to His Highness YKC Wadiyar, to Dr. Kulkarni, to Mr. Sriram, our IGBC chairman from Mysore, Somshekhar, of course, Pyle, Jain, and many other leaders who are present in the participants list, who are all in their own right very distinguished leaders. Some of them who have spoken in this forum, this very of the distinguished lecture series. Some of them who hosted it. Mr. Jeremy Oberoi from Jaipur is here too. Well, this is the 6th edition, as you all noticed from the invitation, and every edition has been distinguished, living up to the name of the series. First, it was Bengaluru, we had Suresh Heblikar, then we had Chandigarh with Ashok Lal, Coimbatore, we had Sirituri, Mumbai, we had some 2 distinguished, wonderful speakers, very inspiring session again. And in Jaipur, we had again, from the Union Ministry, we had somebody speaking on water management and the national policy, as well as one more speaker who came in on very specific models of greening a campus. And now it is Mysore, Jaipur being a royal city, Mysore being another. In fact, happily, it happened like this, that we had Mr. Sriram talking about how he is going to host a session in this month when we did the last session. And somewhere he mentioned this about how Jaipur is a royal city and the host is now moving to his royal city. 2 days later, I called Mr. Sriram and I said, is there a way of getting His Highness to be also part of it? It sparked an idea in his head. And knowing Sriram and his unstoppable ways, he did something to go approach the secretary of the Maharaja. And after that, I think very, very graciously, the Maharaja said yes to it. And so we have this absolutely, genuinely distinguished session that we are having with His Excellency and with Dr. Kulkarni, following it up with the very inspiring work that he's been doing in Mysore. Thoughts that we hope will stimulate leaders in other cities to emulate in their own places is what every series and every session about. As I told you, Coimbatore was one of them, many others. Until 1970, and I'll take about 2 or 3 minutes to set the tone and the context, which will probably help His Highness also to see how he will want to share his reflections with us. I must add that this is a session which is being recorded and will possibly be put up on YouTube for a lot more people to watch. We will have an edited version of His Highness's speech in a way that that message of his, and I'm sure it'll be inspiring, can go to many others. As I said, until about 1970, India was a land of relative comfort on water. People lived off large lakes close to their cities. Bhopal, Chennai, Surat, for instance. Sayaji Rao of Baroda, in those years between the 1860s and 1910, built very intricate water supply systems that respected the river Vishwamitri and drew what was needed for her people. That was in the 1980s. And the design held until about 1970, a full century in Vadodara, as in many cities like Bengaluru. Maharaja Krishnadatta Wadiyar built around the same decades a very delicate and fine network of lakes extending right up to the borders of his kingdom near Sira. Some of you will know of the Vani Vilas Dam, which is again part of that larger strategy and wonderful vision that he brought at that point of time. It is to that lineage and heritage that His Highness Maharaja Yaduveer belongs. It is not every day that one gets to inviting a Maharaja to speak to any audience, I must say that. Today we have him here and he will talk to this wonderful audience of leaders, of green leaders from across India, and will present, we are hoping, something that will be absolutely interesting. There are people from Brisbane, there are people from Sydney who are today, logged into this session. There are people also from Canada, I know, who have logged in. In India, the royal families that have more than a nominal presence are those of the Wadiyars of Mysore, the Gaikwads of Baroda, the Mewar dynasty of Udaipur, for instance, the Khatris of Jaipur. Jeremy Oberoi is here and he will know about that. And he hosted the last session. Of course, the Jadezas of Rajkot, for instance, are still a significant presence. All these royal families, including those of Jodhpur and Bikaner, are people who have been nurturing, trying to do what they can in their own regions. His Highness here is young. He turns 30 next year. He studied in Bangalore and then did English literature and economics at Amherst in Massachusetts, which is a college which is about 200 years old this year, or is it the next year? And has had a tradition of preparing, as it says, as the website says, preparing critical and creative thinkers for lives of purpose and discovery. And when I read that, I told myself, here's a person who's going to offer something really that will be of interest and of purpose and discovery. Some of the famous alumni of that school, the school that he went to, are Calvin Coolidge, that president between 1922 and 1929 or so, around the time of the crash of 1929. Coolidge was the president. And then there has been a prince from, I think, Monaco. And there are Joseph Stiglitz, who came to India. He's an economist who came to India, I think, in 2017 or 18. He's also from that very school. The important Dan Brown, the man who wrote, what is that called, the Da Vinci Code and various other books which were made into films, was also from that school. This Maharaja has a young prince who is now about 5 years old. The idea of having him in this series was born last month, as I said. Our own leader of the real estate. I must say something about Sriram before I, get to talking about Dr. Kulkarni. Sriram he sits in this small town, 1 million people, as I said, and no more than 180 square kilometers, about the size of Bangalore in 1980. He has led national directions for not just one, but 3 major institutions across the country: the Builders Association of India, CREDI, and of course, the IGBC. He sort of is instrumental for forming that chapter in IGBC and driving many initiatives there. Though he wouldn't want, he's embarrassed. I can see that already. That he wouldn't want to be spoken about for long. We also have MG Somshekar, as I said, who is the chairperson. Lovely man again, a very thinking person who tries to see what he can do to bring in frontiers of construction technology and techniques and such things, and in order to enhance sustainability at the levels of a building and its envelope. Well, what more do I want to say? With Sriram, I've known him, for now 20 years. I've always seen him putting public purpose before himself, and it comes naturally to him. He's come up the hard way. I'm sure he doesn't mind my saying this. He's come up the hard way, having lost his father when he was barely out of his teens. I think he was 17 or so at that time. He has driven his company, a company that he built with his brother, slowly but carefully, and earned the respect of his customers and of other industry leaders too. Dr. Kulkarni is a man who has gone about quietly his work on water, sanitation, lakes, both in Bengaluru and in Mysore. I think I will leave it to Sriram to talk more about Dr. Kulkarni. Over to you, Sriram.
Thank you.
You could say something and then request Somshekar to take over from there.
Yeah, I think Somshekar can welcome the gathering on behalf of the. Then I'll speak. I'll be introducing the.
Sure.
Over to you, Som.
A very good evening, very good afternoon to all of you. I'm here as a chair of IGBC Mysore chapter. I have a pleasant duty of welcoming all the dignitaries today. On behalf of Prem Jain Memorial Trust and IGBC, we are jointly trying to see that this distinguished lecture series of 2021 is going to be a good success. First of all, dear friends, today I'm very much honored to extend a very warm welcome to His Holiness Yaduveer Krishnadatta Chamaraja Wadiyar, the present king of our royal dynasty of Mysore. Sir, we welcome you on behalf of the trustees of the Prem Jain Memorial Trust and Indian Green Building Council, Mysore chapter, to have a special address for this lecture series. I welcome you, sir. The people of Mysore will ever remain grateful to the royal family for immense contribution they have done in planning and developing this royal city in the most sustainable manner. We have already lived in a sustainable city created by this royal dynasty. I welcome you again, sir. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Prakash Kulkarni, a man known for his simplicity. He is known for his extensive works as an artist, as an architect of water conservation. He is also in the core committee of Indian Green Building Council, Mysore chapter. I extend a very warm welcome to you, sir. I welcome Dr. Chandrasekhar Hariharan, the trustee of Prem Jain Memorial Trust and Airtech Foundation. His passion to create green buildings as a developer is just unimaginable. He has been a mentor and a guidance force for us in Mysore IGBC Center. He will be the anchor and curator for this lecture series. And also, I welcome all the other participating trustees. I would like to specially welcome Payalji, the trustee of this Prem Jain Memorial Trust, to this evening event. Welcome, madam. I welcome our own friend, Mr. Sriram, an engineer and a developer. His passion to extend a selfless service to the professional organizations like BAI, CREDAI, and IGBC, and his exemplary, and also his an exemplary orator skills have made him a dear to all of us in all the professional organization. We welcome you, Sriram, for this evening event. Most importantly, I'd like to welcome all the participants and the dignitaries for having joined this webinar to make this lecture series a grand success. About my association with Dr. Prem Jain, since 2014, we opened the IGBC chapter in Mysore. He came and installed us as the national chairman. He is known as a father of the green building movement in India. His dream was to make Bharat the Jagat Guru in the field of sustainable buildings. He was a temple of love, a man who lived beyond the boundaries of an ordinary soul. He created an army of the Green Crusaders in India. His thoughts have left an everlasting memory in the future leaders in the history of Indian Green Building Council. Today, IGBC Mysore has the honor of partnering in this distinguished lecture series of Prem Jain Memorial Trust. And the trust is formed with a vision to make his thoughts live forever with the present and the future generation. I thank you very much for having given me an opportunity to welcome all of you. And I wish the function a good success. Thank you.
Fine. Thank you, Somo. Before I start, can I request all the others to kindly mute? I think there's a lot of crosstalk.
That's right.
Request all the others to kindly mute, please.
Yatin, please mute everyone else. Yatin, can you confirm that, please? Yeah, thank you. Yes, Sriram.
Well, good afternoon, and it's a real pleasure today to have the opportunity to introduce our distinguished Maharaja to all of you. Though in print we may be calling him the custodian of the royal family of Mysore, for all of us, he is our dear Maharaja. So it's really my pleasure to introduce the Maharaja to all of you. Yaduveer Krishnadatta Chamaraja Wadiyar is the 27th head and custodian of the erstwhile ruling family of the kingdom of Mysore and the head of the Wadiyar dynasty. Shri YKC Wadiyar, formally adopted by Her Highness Rajmata Dr. Pramoda Devi Wadiyar, wife of late Shrikantadatta Narasimharaja Wadiyar, at the Mysore Palace on the 23rd of February 2015. His primary education began in Bangalore, and he graduated in the United States, as Dr. Hariharan said, from Massachusetts in English and economics. In modern times, with the shift in political landscape and in the moving administration, he has focused his efforts to be a center for heritage of the Deccan and continues to stress always the importance of history, culture, and tradition of the state. The traditions and practice of the Mysore Palace are unbroken for over 400 years, after inheriting the same from the Vijayanagara Empire, whose legacy is embodied within that of the Wadiyars of Mysore. His Highness always strived to highlight these traditions as part of the vibrancy of our state. And in the view of the current custodian, that the rituals, culture, and the affairs of the palace should be sustainable development and the use of education as a tool for bettering our world. What wonderful, noble thoughts. Sri YKC Wadiyar is married to Trishika Kumari Wadiyar, who hails from the Dungarpur royal family in Rajasthan, and has a son, namely Yaduveer Chamaraja Wadiyar. He is a great lover of music. He reads books. He loves riding horses and playing tennis. He has identified himself with several development causes, and the following is the president and trustee of the Sri Jai Chamaraja Asu Education Trust, Mysore, and also the ambassador and on the advisory board of the Kalisu Foundation, Mysore. Here I would like to say just one sentence about this Kalisu Foundation, which is doing fantastic work with children for going to schools all around the city of Mysore and well beyond. And it is the main trustee of the Kalisu Foundation, Mr. Niklesh, who actually enabled us to connect with the Maharaja and enabled his presence on this august platform today. Thanks, Niklesh, again, and to you at the Kalisu Foundation. For us here in Mysore, we have always looked at the entire contributions which the Maharaja and the entire family has done to the city with a sense of awe. We are indeed blessed to be in the city and have such wonderful, foresighted rulers who have ruled the city and made the city and how beautiful it is today. There are so many aspects of Mysore which are absolutely green, and several of the buildings which have been built by the royal family will definitely, even today, definitely qualify for a gold or a platinum rating from the IGBC. I don't know how many of you know, but the Mysore Palace, the roof of the Mysore Palace actually has got a gigantic water tank. The entire water is collected in the tank, so there is water collected there. It also keeps the palace cool, and the same water is used for all the various functions of the palace. So this is something which is fantastic. When they built the palace almost 80 years ago, in those days they have done this, and each and everything which has been done in the city of Mysore has been totally in the realm of sustainable development. And the great contribution and the sacrifices of this family is something which is of folklore. There's one story which I'd like to share with you, which is about when the Krs Dam was being built. That is the lifeline of the entire old Mysore area, the South Karnataka area, and one of the most beautiful dams, and an engineering marvel built by the great engineer Sriram Visvesvaraya. As they were completing the dam, they ran out of funds. The then Maharaja actually went to Bombay and pledged whatever they had to raise funds to actually build and finish this dam. And they pledged whatever they had, my dear friend. Just understand what it was. They came back and they found that it was not enough. And the Maharaja gave out one call saying that to all his subjects to come and contribute. It's written everywhere saying that people queued up in front of the palace. Housewives came and gave their jewelry. People gave the silverware. And with that, finally the dam was constructed. Why did all this happen? This was for the love and passion which they had for their beloved Maharaja. And I think all of us in Mysore, even today, have it. So, ladies and gentlemen, all of you on this platform, I've got great pleasure in presenting to all of you Yaduveer Krishnadatta Chamaraja Wadiyar, the Maharaja of Mysore. So I will be introducing Dr. Kulkarni later, sir, just before he speaks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Sriram, for that very lovely intro. Dr. Hariharan, all of the esteemed panelists today, all of the attendees, ladies and gentlemen, it's truly a pleasure to be here today and talk to you all about briefly about my ideas of something that I'm truly passionate about is buildings and being sustainable going forward. And certainly, of course, our own history and other lineages in India and their association with water, and why we especially took to it that we had sustainable means of water, creating reservoirs of water rather, throughout our cities or the states that we were in charge of as we grew up. Briefly, just wanted to mention, of course, why while in college, of course, we were, I was, economics being my major, you would have to take various different angles at it, and one would be, of course, environmental economics. And I remember being tasked with, which were already LEED certified buildings, but nonetheless, how you could tweak whatever the goings on or your interactions with the building in how to better it, so that it's more sustainable than it already is. And these were certified, if not platinum, gold, or some high level of LEED, all of our university buildings. And we had a very fun cost benefit analysis on how we could improve the way in which we needn't bring bottles to school anymore, and needn't purchase plastic bottles rather. So it's I've had some sort of small interaction with how to make our buildings greener, and it's something that is truly passionate. And when I came back to Mysore, I didn't think I'd have much of a role in it, but nonetheless, after sort of studying the importance of heritage, and one facet of it, a large facet of the heritage buildings, the more you study about it, the more you understand how in tune with sustainability and being environmentally friendly our old buildings are. Whether it is the Shukli mortar, which is very sort of conducive to our environment and allows the buildings to breathe and make it light without heavy foundations, or just the fact of the architecture of the buildings in those days, in which allowed it to cool naturally given our hot climate here in Mysore. All of which surrounding here are buildings that are either influenced by perhaps Persian influences or an Oriental influence, but are uniquely Mysorean or South Carnatic in that sense. So preserving that, and a plus point in preserving that is, of course, the environmental sustainability, and the fact that the cost of bringing these down and putting up concrete structures is environmentally much more costly than what would be, is something that has helped. My education has helped in understanding and putting across as a point when we talk with government as to why these heritage buildings need to be conserved. Secondly, of course, when it comes to your current today's topic of water, I believe Dr. Hariharan just briefly touched on it, the fact of creating lakes. And I was just reading up incidentally while you were talking, because I wanted to see again, both the Lingambudhi and Devambudhi tanks around Mysore were created. Of course, Devambudhi known as Varuna Lake nowadays more colloquially, but the correct name would be Devambudhi Lake. Both of them, at the end of them, have a very nice, the inscriptions for both of the lakes. Both of them were, of course, one was Lingajamani, the first wife, and the second wife, Devajamani, built the Devambudhi tank. So both of which have inscriptions on them. And the last part of the inscription reads very nicely, the kings, whether be my own descendants or descendants of other kings, who always protect my charities intent on dharmas, I bow to their lotus feet with my head. And that is truly, I think, the ideal with which they built or understood by building it. We have the famous proverb, a man who plants a tree without knowing fully well that he'll never see or have to enjoy its shade, is the one who's understood life. And I think that's the vision with which India's sort of architecture of water has really been built. It was a necessity at the time because that was the primary resource which was required for daily use, not just in bathing, etc., but also as a driver of the economy, be it in whatever industry or handicraft they were doing. Secondly, of course, another incident which I came across while researching for Mysore was the fact that the East India Company very clearly states, when they came to do a survey in Mysore, this is post-Tipu, so the very early 1800s, that Bangalore was the most sustainable, or rather water, there was enough water here to feed the entire state, despite the fact that we were on a plateau. Essentially, the Raj Kaluways and the reservoirs built throughout the years was so sustainable that we had enough water to manage the population going forward. And so seeing the deterioration from that over the years is really something we should question as to why we this sort of ideal of, now if you look at it from whatever the kings gave at that time, be taken forward by us as individuals in what is a democratic setup, why we weren't unable to preserve that money forward. And the leading case, many of you might be very aware, the Karaga festival that happens in Bangalore, which they go to what is now the Kantiva Indoor Stadium, and still remnant of the old lake is there. They pick up the mud there. So that was the old people who were in charge of maintenance of the lake. And we've unfortunately built stadiums over it or parking lots over it, and lost that heritage of being completely sustainable when it comes to water and having no shortage. The means by which we are having to destroy our local ecosystems here in Mysore, in and around Mysore. We know of the many water projects which are bringing water into Bangalore, which are causing a disruption in many forests. The Yaduveer project, which was done recently, nearly 34 to 36 square kilometers of virgin forest, this is untouched virgin forest, was destroyed in the making of that water project to bring water to Bangalore. We know of other water projects which are either supposed to be underway or not underway. The damming, which is intended damming at Mekedatu, which is again going to destroy a huge chunk of forest. We have several other projects which we look at past, even the Kabini Dam, which is seen now as a plus. The initial area which was earmarked for the dam, which was earmarked, was at Itna, which was much further ahead, wouldn't have destroyed so much forest, and the water would have stacked up vertically rather than here where it is more horizontal. So there are many questions to be asked as to why we took these steps going forward. Truly, when it looks at Indian architecture and how we got it right so many years before, whereas now going forward, we are seen to be taking several missteps. Water, of course, India is key, not just because of the huge population we have, but our rivers are all rain-fed. We have very, very landscape, and of course, again, hardly any glacial rivers. So adjusting and preserving water and having a means of understanding on how to use water in a way that's sustainable and can be sustainable moving forward is key for all of us going ahead, and is something we are very passionate about. And there's a great amount to learn from our own India, as you say, India's architecture of water. So it's truly a pleasure to be here, and I hope to learn a lot more from everyone that's going to talk today. I hope this little tidbits of history of what I know on the surface of it is entertaining, or rather enlightening to you all today. Again, it's truly a pleasure. I wish the panel a great success, and truly happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Extremely inspiring. Very, very understated, but powerful in the implications of what you are stating. There are lessons, as you're saying, from what was done in those early decades of the last century, or of the. Can you expand on that? When you say, for example, there are cities are. Not that you said this, but I'm paraphrasing you. There are cities are, all consuming in their ways, and therefore destroy what is left in the natural ecosystems, whether it's for water or for energy. Would you want to say something more on how the youngsters today, to those in college, those in school today, are sensitized to how the very simple act of consuming those 400, 500 units of energy in a house and in a month, and therefore 6,000 units in a year, means at a 4x level of source energy at some thermal plant about 24,000 units. And therefore, one simple average middle class home consumes 20 tons of coal in order to see that their home is powered. How do we get this connecting of dots happen in the minds of these school children and of college goers?
Thank you, Dr. Hariharan. I mean, so again, coming back to an economic question, it's always from a sort of a more of a question of your viewpoint, in the sense, do you look at it at the micro level, wherein each individual can affect change, or at the macro level, where the change has to come in either from the government, either via costs or them adapting to more greener technology on a large scale going forward. So I think, as usual, the answer always somewhere in the middle. I think in our education systems now, certainly when I was, until I reached college, sustainability, environment, all of these terms were very not used as much as I think it is used now. And this is quite recent. So a decade ago, when I finished 12th standard, only in college did these terms really pick up, because I suppose it became really pertinent at that time. So only from a decade are we really getting this idea that we are, potentially the West has known that they are planetary stewards from the 60s, but now I think in our own India and etc., especially down at the rural level, the idea that we are stewards to the planet is percolating down right now. So I think pushing that along will definitely help at the individual level. We must consume less at home. But at the end of the day, if the macro structure does not respond to that and move towards more greener technologies to generate energy, be it solar, be it water, that's hydro-based, we do not know, or even perhaps nuclear in a safe means if it's vetted and moving forward. That is the ultimate goal, because our energy consumption is only going to go up. That is the main unit by which the economic or the economy is driven. As we are able to consume more energy and utilize it more efficiently, we will be able to do more things efficiently. And that is a key part of driving our economy as well. So I think both two ways, maybe perhaps the government should reflect on the costs, but I know that's a very touchy subject. We cannot keep raising costs any higher. It's already gone up ridiculously. But then again, I suppose adapting to greener technologies too will definitely help. And then at the policy level, those who are writing policy and advising government on policy should be looking at not just 5-year plans, but rather 100 years ahead, because that's what we did going, so many years ago. The idea of everlasting value is something that is key. And if you look at Mysore state itself, the number of institutions built outside the Indian Institute of Science, take Mysore Sandal Soaps, Mysore Silks, the University of Mysore, many other institutions, all have lasted over 100 years. And I was fortunate to attend the centenary of many of them. This is primarily because the understanding that value is not built for today and tomorrow, but for 100 years ahead. I think that coming in will certainly help sustainability grow leaps and bounds.
To take that story of Sriram, where many hundreds of families came to the gates of the Maharaja then and said that here is my jewelry, see what you can do to complete what you have taken as a public purpose. If I were to take that analogy to this point in time where, and probably I would like to think I'm not quoting you out of the context, when you said that water is a key driver of the economy, if you turned that around and said that the people of a city who are water users, let us say water bulk users, it could be industry people. For instance, in Mysore, you know the large quantums of water that Nanjangud uses in the industrial cluster. If there is a way that all such water bulk users decided that they will do what your ancestors did, your distinguished royal ancestors did on the palace, rainwater rooftop with tanks being set up. My God, that's amazing. Done in 1910, 1912. If you were to do such things with people doing it, and these barriers of behavior to adoption of such practices are taken up, it would dramatically reduce this business of the brutality of public expenditure. Do you believe so?
Surely, I mean, certainly there is an argument for that case. And while I'm a big believer that as if you are a big enough company and you have making money of resources from locally, you should certainly contribute to helping back that local resource or resuscitating or keeping it viable for future generations to use. But then again, as a company and profit oriented, unless there is a policy directing them to do so from the government, they have no legal reason to do so. So again, steps in that role of administration, of policymakers, which comes back to us then, to drive it, to force those people to do such activities that help out, maybe the sustainability of that the Kabini River coming in there and cleaning it up, or whatever sewage comes out of them or wastewater comes out, is clean to whatever degree it needs to be so that it's sustainable and the water gets oxygenated or whatever it may be before it reaches the next damming site. But surely a citizen-led initiative will impact to great detail, especially locally. Making them aware of such issues will percolate upwards, rather up the ladder, and help macro decisions, take better macro decisions that are more environmentally friendly.
Sure. Sriram, over to you to see how you want to steer the proceedings. You have to unmute. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hariharan. Absolutely amazed at the knowledge and the awareness of our Maharaja. Great, it's wonderful, and it's so heartening to hear what he was talking about. Or let us look at 100 years. This is something which is so wonderful to be talked about, because today we are having more and more short-sighted leadership coming through. And when somebody comes and says plan for 100 years, it's music to our ears. And I think a good part of his entire thought process is so much in sync with what we are trying to do at the Indian Green Building Council. So the aspect here is that Dr. Jain, who was our chairman for almost a decade, who really inspired on the entire green building movement in our country and made us become the second biggest footprint of green buildings in the world. So India became the #2 country just behind USA. From being nowhere in about just 2 decades, we just made it to become the #2. And it was of great leadership which we had, inspirational leadership we had, and lots of sacrifices done by the entire team at IGBC and bringing this whole thing ahead. So I think a lot of your thoughts are very much in sync with what we do as a council on the national level. So we'll be looking forward to a lot of interaction with you, and maybe get a lot of more such jams from all of you. Because when a person like you says it, people sit up and listen to it much with a lot of attention. So actually, there's one. Our Maharaja is such an humble man. I regularly see him driving his own car, and along with his son to drop him off at his grandparents' place or whatever. He doesn't even use a driver a good part of the time, and I'm always amazed when I see him driving himself. Just imagine a Maharaja driving himself. So a man of great humility, and today we also found out that a very great depth of knowledge as well. So we do thank you. So thank you, Your Highness, for having joined us today.
I don't consider it anyway anything humble. After all, I enjoy driving very much. I wanted to also tell you, right from Krishnadatta's time, he used to drive his own. I keep forgetting the chariot and sit on top where the charioteer would be, and drive it around Mysore as well. And my grandfather also, many stories you can ask all of my aunts, used to drive them up to Chamaraja Hill and back many times in his car. So it's not the first to do it. They've all enjoyed driving, and it's not at all anything to, might seem humble to this thing. It's fairly ordinary for us, and we absolutely enjoy doing it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Your Highness. We do thank His Highness for having been with us on this panel. So if you do have the time, sir, please do stay with us, because we've got a very interesting speaker coming up, a person who's done a lot of work. Again, very understated, very humble. I have got great pleasure in introducing a dear friend of all of us, Dr. Prakash Kulkarni. He's done his civil engineering from the BVP College from Hubballi and an MTech in environmental engineering. One of the few people to obtain a PhD in techno-legal interdisciplinary from the National Law School of India, Bangalore. He is a water and sanitation specialist with more than 36 years of experience. He was working with the government for quite some time, for almost about 20 years, and at the government managed a lot of projects which was World Bank aided, and also with the Asian Development Bank. He took voluntary retirement from public service and worked as a project manager for an international voluntary organization, which all of us know quite well. That's the Water and Sanitation for Urban Poor, WSUP. He is the president of Bhagiratha, a technical NGO working in water and sanitation sector for the past 21 years. Involved in preparation of city sanitation plan in Karnataka, working in 15 districts for solid and liquid waste management. He regularly participates as a resource person in the training programs, workshops conducted on water and sanitation by the Administrative Training Institute, the SIUT, and many institutions around the country on similar topics. He has presented papers at various international and national fora on issues relating to water, sanitation, and community participation. He has also contributed to several working groups and policy debates on water sector reform in Karnataka, specifically in the area of improving the service delivery and sustainability through public-private partnership. He is the founder and director in the following organizations: Jalavahini Management Services Private Limited, JMS Biotech Private Limited, and Mysore Water Services Private Limited. These organizations are involving in designing and execution of innovative and cost-effective solutions from water and waste treatment and management. Notable ones are the Heber Lake in Mysore, which was done by the Infosys Foundation, the Hebgodi Lake in Bangalore, which was done by the Biocon Foundation. He is a member of the expert committee on solid waste management to report on the landslide which happened in Bangalore in 2018. He is part of several expert committees set up by the state government and the central government. In addition, he was also co-opted as an expert on the advisory committee of public-private partnerships of the government of Karnataka, the Swachh Bharata mission, and the Jal Jeevan mission. He has visited several countries around the world and has participated in several seminars as a speaker around the world. I have got great pleasure in presenting to all of you our distinguished speaker this evening, Dr. Prakash Kulkarni. I think you have to highlight Dr. Prakash. I think you have highlighted Dr. Chaitanya Kulkarni from Belgaum. He is our co-chair of IGBC Belgaum.
Yatin, have you done that?
Over to you, Dr. Kulkarni.
Yes. Namaskar. At the outset, let me thank the management and the organizers of Prem Jain Memorial Trust and IGBC for having extended an invitation to me. And I'm truly honored to speak before the High Highness Sri Wadiyar, such a august audience across the country.
Do you need any help, Dr. Kulkarni? We can see
Hello?
the screen.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can see the screen. Okay. I have a bad throat, so should there be a reduction in the tone, kindly excuse. What I will do in the next 25 minutes would be to speak a little bit on the traditions in terms of water management in this country, look at the present problems that we all face, then what is the role of government and some legal perspective. Then why do we have to revive an urban lake? Urban lake was something that I have chosen to speak, given the complexity of that water body, and then have some case studies on the revivals that are underway. And at the end, say something on what is the way forward. Now, a few basics as to what nature has given us in terms of hydrological cycle. Rain continues to be the primary source for all the water, and we have surface water which flows above the ground and something which is below the ground. We don't happen to see it. So the reservoir of water that is in the aquifers for hundreds of years, we don't see them. And we started tapping them only during the last 40, 50 years in great amount. So if you look at the hydrological cycle, what appears to be very, very critical now in present times is the overexploitations of the groundwater. And whatever measures were taken earlier in terms of securing water for the people, maybe in terms of having wells, maybe tanks, etc. Many of them don't seem valid today because the water table has gone down. So what I will try to do is to focus on one critical water body, and that will be the lake. I have chosen urban lake because it poses a lot of challenges and one of the most complex ecosystems. So I will speak more on the lake. If we look at the traditional practices of water management, we recognize principally two sources. One was the surface source, primarily the streams, river, nala, and then the groundwater. Groundwater always meant whatever we were able to tap from the open well or the dug well. We never had a concept of drawing water from deep aquifers. And the basic concept was just catch the water wherever it falls and whenever it falls. So historically, if you see the patterns of rainfall, more or less each area continues to receive the annual precipitation more or less same. So you have years where you have more rainfall, again years which are lesser rainfall, some years extremely low rainfall. So droughts and floods have been of regular occurrence in the past as well, and we had inbuilt certain measures which took care of it. Those people were more intelligent. They had built rainwater harvesting structures. And if you look at the shape, the geometry, the kind of quality of the material used, so I think uh, if we have to build those kind of structures with all the scientific advancement that we hold today, I think it still continues to remain a big challenge. They didn't have mass means of transport, so they always used materials which are locally available, local talent, and they did extremely well. They had harvest structure which were named something like Jalar, Tawab, Kund, Kalyani. In our case, we call them as Kalyani, Kunte, Katte. Some places we had lot of sacredness to that water body. We call them as Devarakatte. So most of our traditions uh, and the festivals also were revolving around the basic monsoon period, the way we harvested. So the traditions, cultures sank very well with the availability of water. So there was no artificial application of water for crops. So there's nothing like irrigation. So the soil structure, the availability of water mostly dictated the food practices and the cultures. So this is something which you find across the country as a traditional practice of having managed waters, and quite brilliantly. We had built some marvelous structures north, south, everywhere. To make it simpler, I thought we will break up this part.
We lost you there, Dr. Kulkarni. You need to unmute. Dr. Kulkarni, you have to unmute. Yatin, can you do that, please? Can you unmute him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm.
Sure.
You can hear me now?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Hello? I'm audible?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have broken into three parts. One is the ancient India, from the Chanakya Arthashastra, you find reference to irrigation practices then. Then the various kingdoms, Chola, Chalukya, right up to the Vijayanagara Empire. And we also acknowledge that we're a groundwater-based civilization, and the only mantra then was build tanks, dig wells, and plant trees. A very, very simple measures they took up, and that represented the past India. The pre and the post independence, something that I think is fairly relevant for about 15 to 20 years post independence, where India mostly lived in the villages. And one big difference came with the introduction of the Green Revolution. Now, 1962, the moment the chemical fertilizers were introduced, under the disguise that we need to have more food production, we need to have food security, and we wanted to do away with the imports, and we bought in the hybrid seeds, little realizing that the chemical fertilizers and the hybrid seeds also demand more water. So that was the beginning of uh, the native seeds going to the background, and we started putting into use the chemical fertilizers, and the water demand kept on increasing. One way we found to meet the water demand was to build dams. Up to independence, we had some 300 plus dams, many of them built during the previous dynasties, kingdoms, and some built also during the British era. And today we have about 5,000 plus dams. So we can imagine last 70 plus years, we have added up something like 4,700 dams. Now, the very purpose of building dams had two purposes. One was to have our share of water in the rivers to different awards, Bachavat Award, Krishna Kaveri rivers. And other was to make available this water through a network of canals to areas which are water stressed. And we thought we'll also improve the quality of life and the economics of the regions. The post economic reforms, which happened in the 90s, 91 precisely, these reforms happened not because of the people who fought for some kind of freedom or better services. Sheer bankruptcy of the governments where they didn't have money to pay the debt, and we had to embrace reforms, and we accepted certain liberalization policies, enabled private sector to move in, and had a different view of the global practices. So what we saw during the initial years post 91 was the monopolies were broken, competition was enabled. So we saw the power sector opening up, we saw the airlines opening up, then we had electricity distribution. Many sectors opened up, and the whole world waited to see whether water will be also be opened up in India. A huge sector, so much of population. Little realizing that what is a very sensitive subject in our country, has a lot of emotions, lot of sentiments attached. There is a large political economy with the decision making when it comes to water, and many foreign companies who moved to this country in the early 90s had to shut their shop and go back. Now these are not areas where we can work on viability and collect money from the users. It's a very, very difficult area. So what we now find in future is something like the rights and allocation of water gaining importance now. Now, why am I talking of rights and allocation? Primarily because our lifestyle, our wants, and our requirement for water today, apart from the growing population, is also the limiting resource now. The entire economic development, the entire our ideas of sustainable development, trying to achieve goals will be limited by availability of water and our ability to manage it. So this is how I have looked at the past, present, and the future. Now, while the researchers and academicians and the knowledgeable people kept debating is water an economic resource or a free social good, we had another interesting part of water which we did not take a very close look at, which was the ability of water to unite people. We kept fighting our neighboring states, and Karnataka is very complex state. We fight Tamil Nadu, Pondicherry, the Kaveri. We fight there with Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra on Krishna. Then we fight on Mahadayi with Goa. So we are sandwiched between many states, and these rivers recognizing no political boundary, no administrative boundaries. It simply flows, follows its own natural laws, and the constitution did whatever best it could do in terms of bringing about legislations, and we had the central and the state which were given certain powers with respect to the functions relating to water. So they did a good job, absolutely, in terms of conceptualizing, in terms of the policy intent. There's nothing to find fault. Now, the legal mandate for providing safe drinking water and ensuring that the waste which is produced by any human activity is safely disposed. That's a very basic of sanitation, is to safely dispose of waste. If you're able to recover certain reserves out of it, that's fine, but it is always safe disposal. And when we talk of drinking water, it always meant safe drinking water. And what we conveniently forgot is that word called safe. Now, safe is a key word when it comes to water and context that I'm trying to set now. So what's the problem now? What's the problem? Our problem is a large population, a small geographical area comparatively, and we do not have enough of water in any case. 1,000 meter cube is the stress level, and today we are about 1,100 meter cube. That's the per capita availability of water itself. So it is sufficient to acknowledge that water as a resource is limited to the country. Maybe there are floods in the north. We have drought and scarcity in the south, but India as a whole, we have a limiting scarce resource called water. So we started talking about interlinking of rivers. So that's the first part. The second part is to look at the way we are managing this resource. The moment we are entering into a crisis, what is demanded is a better way of managing it. We have to recognize that water is a critical infrastructure which is finite. The groundwater is finite. We cannot mine water eternally unless we are able to recharge that water underneath. So we look at this problem and are able to identify 3 or 4 of them. Now, one is how much are we sensitive to the issues of conservation and pollution? Second is, do we have enough infrastructure that is built over a period of time to hold water whenever it rains? Then we have relied so much on government. Maybe the past, there was not much of dependency of the local communities to finding solutions to their problems, especially when it came to water and food needs. But over the period, over the last 4 or 5 decades, increasingly we have dependent ourselves on the for the basics also on the government. And governments, like everywhere else in the world, have a lot of limitations. And we'll take a very close look after seeing some photos as to what government has been able to do and are those capacities sufficient. And many times monopolies were set up. Maybe in the 1960s, we had the Bangalore Water Supply Sewerage Board Act, and then you had the Karnataka Urban Water Supply Drainage Board Act, then you had the Command Area Development Act. So we have had a series of legislation to do with certain aspects of water. The whole purpose that they're able to deliver that service, and these are public services. So while the intent was good, the institutions that were laid out to deliver services, maybe they did quite well initially, but over a period of time, we also found them wanting in terms of their performance. We set up multiple institutions and many of them had overlapping responsibilities. So we are not able to fix up accountability. We're not very transparent in terms of trying to put before people how much does it cost us to give water itself. So, and we did not display courage to charge for water, and question of collecting money for water that is supplied was a distant dream. We need to understand that we are a net exporter of virtual water. Take the Kaveri Basin, the foresightedness of the Maharajas in the pre-British era. We have seen the southern part of Karnataka, which is flush with water and greenery, and we export certain cereals, rice from this region to Gulf maybe, and where water stays state, and when we export rice from here with that green, we also send out our Kaveri water. It is cheaper for them to consume, but at what cost? And we bear the cost associated with its production, transportation. So we have to recognize that we're a very water intense economy, and whatever it takes to manage water well, reduce the inefficiency, bring about best practice in water management, to that extent we have done justice to this. Let me tell you a few things on drinking water, then I move to the lake. Look at the people and their understanding of conserving water. There is a locking arrangement. One thing is they always had a tap, a good tap, and they used to lock and go when they were going out of their hometown. All problems started for our engineers with the advent of plastics, and worst is when the pressure also dropped in a pipeline. So where had some space, they had a small structure right in front of their house to collect. There was never a tap. Why no tap? How does he know that water has come? So there was never a concept of a tap. the water kept on filling. They get once in 4 days, 5 days, 6 days. And the second photo depicts the intermittent supply and lesser pressure. So as the pressure goes down, this lady still tries to go down and collect water. And one fine day, she puts the motor to suck water. Now, does she realize that once she starts sucking water, our infrastructure that is laid out is essentially a network-based infrastructure. All infrastructures related to water, be it irrigation canals, be it drinking water supply, be it our sewer network of underground drainage system, all of them are network-based. Making somebody exclude from the network is very, very difficult. But at the same time, when somebody starts sucking water just because the pressure in the pipe drops, and what do others do? You ask them a question and they say, no, sir, everyone has to suck water from the pipeline. Now, this is the public service. Now, I'm not talking about people who have good understanding of the health and its relation to waterborne diseases, water and sanitation. I'm talking of the public who are poor people for whom public supplies matter a lot. The moment I find this water not safe to drink, then I go with the filter system, which were never there 2-3 decades ago. There was no concept of a household filter. And with increasing awareness on the incidence of diseases, we started trying to find our own way of solving the problem, not relying on the ability of the government or question the government as to why a public supply was bad. All that people would ask is a small meter where we're able to measure the volumetric consumption, and you have a tap. And if you're able to give water to this level, maybe it's not a continuous pressurized 24/7 that this really demands in terms of the pipeline's ability to carry water all the time through. That's the best system. That's what a service level benchmark is for drinking water supply. Even if you have to have an intermittent supply for a variety of reasons, would still feel a meter which tracks the consumption. We're able to bill them. Then you have a tap and some pressure which is able to correct. This is, I think, something that we look forward. So government not able to provide the safe drinking water, came up with another scheme called Shuddha Jal, where you have a community RO system because they can't afford to have an individual household filters. So we thought of giving them a community, pay some 2 rupees, collect 10 liters. So we didn't have people wasting water. They understood the value of water. So you find plenty of them. So you have the contaminants being removed through the use of filter, and the local people take the water. Now, coming back to the planning per se, planning, and now we'll focus on the urban areas now. Now, so we have paved the surfaces, and we mostly lived in the villages. We never had a urbanization the way we see today. I'm not talking of only the metros, Delhi, Chennai. No, I'm talking of small towns, Sripura, maybe Shimoga, where even the smallest flood, which we call them as the flash flood, it's not the duration is very heavy, but because we paved the surface, even the smallest of the rainfall ends up as a flood and exposes the gap in the infrastructure that we laid out. Planning has not been very great for the architects or the urban planners because this aspect of water, the contamination of water, has never been part of their curriculum, nor has been the part of curriculum for civil engineers also, because till 70s, 80s, water was not treated to be a big problem. So when we choose 35 years to study water, we are called as gutter engineers. They said, why are you doing gutter engineering? You're all such bright people. So, but I don't know, maybe destiny has had it. We choose to do water and sanitation. Now, this scarce resource has competing users, and financial constraints are also real now. We don't have enough money, and we don't have enough money. The planning has not been extraordinary, and delivery of services also have been inefficient. And all our focus has been on asset creation, and we do not think too much about the sustainability and our ability to extract services from these assets. So, focus on the operation maintenance has not been very, very good. Now, future of water in India, there are some predictions, and we have polluted more than 80% of our water sources, and 21 cities would run out of water. But now 2020 has come, but we're not finding it. So question marks will remain. Now, let me show you why our cities are likely to face problems in the near future. Look at the way that we have laid our stormwater drains. There's no space, and we have laid roads on stormwater drains, and we had recently the National Green Tribunal, the custodian of the environmental laws in this country, where they made a very scathing remark on the municipality, saying that the wastewater that we see that flows in the drains, pollutes the lakes and the rivers, is on account of mainly the domestic sewage. And the state, as trustee of people rights, has not done what should be doing, and that its duty is clearly breached. NGT is something that is bringing out a lot of focus on the issue of water quality, and these are some of the photos which show us about the way the infrastructure has been laid, and these are the same underground drainage system that were in the natural valleys, and they have no other place to go other than the lakes that the Raj Kalways were built. So if uh, we built earlier the tanks to meet our water needs, now it is the same lakes which may be in series or in isolation carry the wastewater only because of the habitations which have come around these lakes. And the natural valleys, instead of carrying the rainwater during the rainy season, also would carry the wastewater and any waste that is dumped into it. Now, let me show you some photos on the lake. Now, these are our lakes now, and most of the photos that I'm showing are places where we are involved in our works. So look at this lake, it's completely polluted lake. Uh, Eutrophication has happened, oxygen levels are extremely low, fishes don't survive there. And look at the Raj Kalways that lead to these lakes. This is the famous Balandur Lake, and no one thought there can be also a fire on the lake. Balandur Vartus are lakes which sustained the city of Bangalore, and was in the news in the recent past. Look at the way the foaming and the gases that are emitted there. This is another lake where, due to invasive species and the increasing ingress of wastewater into the lake, creates a situation where we are not able to ensure sufficient oxygen for the flora fauna to sustain. And we took satisfaction saying, if I have a functional STP, the lake is safe. But look at it, we have a functional STP here, but we have the lake which is full of weeds. Not that the STP is not delivering, STP is delivering, it is giving us good quality, but already the decayed component of the lake, we'll have to do something to get out of the pollution which is already in the lake, and also then add up to the treated water from the STP. So this is another interesting one where the Constitution of India is displayed in one of the hoardings near a lake, and reminds us of our responsibilities and obligations. And it is the same forest department which also has taken over a lake, created into a park, and now it appears to be a park now. So after maybe another few years, people will not even know that a park existed. The way we have lost our lake is, one is we disturb the catchment, we construct stormwater drains, taking the water away from the lake, then we dump the construction debris and start leveling it. And one fine morning, it's very easy for people to say that it's the only recreational space that we can use by way of having parks and trees, and that's how what the forest department has done in few cases. The second one was these lake areas. One information we have over a period of time is the government itself did layouts where these lakes were there, and even now there are certain lakes which are used for urban gyms and senior citizen homes, recreation centers. So the very purpose of a lake, what was to recharge the groundwater, provide for the birds, the flora, fauna, etc. It is now turning out to be a priority, not in real case. And if the water quality is not good, the very character of the lake itself is lost. So it comes to issue of what is governance and what is the role of government itself. So it's something who told in 2002 saying the of uh, governance is far more clearer now, and it's nothing to do with water scarcity as such. And if future has to be secure, then I think we should make sure that water is there and it's available, managed well. I was looking at where does this word, the word govern it comes from a Greek root by name kiber, which was to steer, which is the job of government is to steer, not to row. So which means if government decides to run airlines or repair a street light, it is an act of rowing and it's not very good at it. The government should do what it is good at, which is to steer, while leaving the balance functions of rowing to the private sector. Now there are little issues and challenges with urban. One of them has been taking care of the water quality parameters like BOD, COD, oil and grease, and trying to see how do you make available the critical finances, and are we able to comply to the various environmental laws in force. So what do we do now? We'll try and adopt sustainable and smart water management practices so that we're able to build a water secure future. Now we'll talk a few things on why do we have to revive a polluted urban water body. Two sessions which happened in the same lecture series. One was Sri Heblikar and Mrs. Vanita Mohan of Sirutali. They left at a point where saying that we need to do something with the waste now. So the focus has shifted from the water to waste because the bulk of the waste also is appearing in the water bodies. So I will try and highlight critical issues. Now, when someone says, can you improve the water body? We need to ask 4 questions. What is the purpose of improvement? Is it for recreation? You want to raise the water table, or what is it actually? The irrigation is no more there in any place. And who are the owners? Who is a custodian? Custodian plays a very, very, very critical role. And what kind of interventions are we speaking? And then look at one-time cost and the recurring cost, and who is going to maintain it? Very, very critical question. A lot of money has been spent by CSR, by the government, which is one-time investment, but how much money is required for subsequent operation maintenance? Who will fund it is something which is critical and to be answered. Now, a complex ecosystem, and our concerns will continue to be on the ingress of wastewater, the solid waste that is dumped, the nutrient buildup, the silt and sludge that is deposited, a massive enforcement that happens on these urban spaces, and then the floating debris. Now, the nature has a very, very simple way of healing itself. Like as the water moves, there is some kind of adsorption, degradation, some filtration will be happening. There is some aeration, cascading effects on it, and sedimentation. It's a natural process of purification happening both in the streams, in the rivers, and also the nalas that also lead to the lakes. But when the loading of pollutants happens beyond a certain level, then what we try to do is to adopt the same natural principle, but add on something which are very, very specific, which are cost effective and which are innovative, which brings down the cost. Now, let me show you a few stories of lake revival. And this is Heber CSR Lake, 2016. Bad news again. A Gram Panchayat graduates itself to become a city municipal council thanks to electronic city and its development. And field of sewage has about 10 mld of wastewater coming up, and we have no space to build an STP, and the government does not have money. That is the time when Biocon, who are just on the bank of this lake, decided to fund this initiative. Took a long time to convince the committees and the project proponents, saying that if I don't have space and if I don't have money, then what do? We can as well treat in the lake itself. So that's how this work happened. It went into the Limca Book of World Records in the process. And this is how it looked previously. And once this lake was revived, not much money was spent. About on water quality, we spent something around 80 lakhs, and the real estate prices boomed up, affecting this lake area. This is Heber Lake, Infosys Foundation, probably the costliest CSR in this country. We spent about 25 crores on this Mysore Lake, and we always thought if you have a high technology to treat the wastewater and then let it into the lake, but did not guarantee that the fishes will survive. We had again a fish kill, and what it brought to the fore was these are natural systems, these are living entities. The way they respond to a treatment, the way they respond to a mix of technology, sometimes defy our understanding. And we could see even on such a big lake, sometimes we had the fish kill and we told them to aerate the lake straight away. Not sufficient that I have a STP and let this water in, but also required to aerate and have some oxygen being imparted into the lake. So this is how the lake looked previously and now post development Infosys. This is Unkal Lake Hubli under a smart city mission has been taken up. Again, in the bad news over the last decade, many times attempts in the past where the whole hyacinth gets covered. We have about 10 MLD of wastewater coming into the lake, supposed to be the biggest lake in North Karnataka. And we took up this work about 6 months back and completely full of weeds. And we had to remove this weed to enable the oxygen and also to enable taking up the work of development inside the lake. We installed different aerators now, and so you can see the lake earlier and now it's under progress now. This is an interesting lake, a private lake, again in Bangalore, private lake. Not much of information is available. It's a 10-acre lake, and unfortunately, he has to receive the wastewater of the adjoining weavers colony, and they send something like 8 to 10 MLD of water. It's a recreation spot. There is a private resort, and people come there for recreation, paying thousands of rupees, and he has to live with the smell, stench, and also the bad quality. And we're able to carry out work in this lake. So again, the focus is on water quality, and takes about 3 to 4 weeks. That's also, it's not a very complex thing to improve water quality in a highly polluted water body, be it river, be it lake. It's not so complex. There are mix of technology. It has to depend on the approach and what is the mix of hybrid solutions that we bring to the table. Now, this another interesting one, which is trying to fill the tanks with the treated wastewater in Bangalore. So we have 3-4 valleys in Bangalore. Prominent among them has been the Koromangala Chalgatla Valley, which we treat about 400 mld of wastewater. We have made massive infrastructure to pump this wastewater which is treated and fill the tanks in Kolar. Now look at Kolar. Now Kolar is one district where we have very hardworking people, dry area, the driest area in the state, where they grow extremely good vegetables, but unfortunately over a period of time, due to climate change, due to rainfall variations, they all went dry, and we found a way of filling up this treated wastewater into the lakes. And these are the photos. And while we all kept debating on is it safe, what happens if somebody touches water, was on one side, but government spent 1,200 crores plus, and we have filled 126 tanks. Now, it could be a norm. And one memory, we go back about 4 or 5 years back, Tamil Nadu, they were making a case against Karnataka saying, you are sending wastewater of Bangalore into our rivers and you are killing us. And when they saw this kind of rivers being taken up, they started asking, no, 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 give us that water also. So it's not about the quantity and the quality. It is basically the water that is being made available. The livelihood of the people depends on it. So no matter what we may all say, but then people in Kolar, Chikballapura are extremely happy. They're able to bring back livelihood opportunities in them, and that's something of a recent development. Now, what are our interventions basically? Our interventions, I'll just shoot few photos. The first is to arrest the floating matter that is getting into the water body. So we have a crash barrier. There are different models available. The whole function is to arrest the floating matter as it enters the lake, because once it goes inside, very, very, very difficult to take it out. The second one is de-weeding. We don't have to really do de-weeding on a large scale, but then the management of a lake is a science and art both. For a common man, he thinks if the water surface is able to see and doesn't see any weed on the top, he says that's the best water. So we are also caught in between the two. So even technically, though we say about 30% is something that we should always maintain, the hyacinth, which are actually a natural defense system, which the lake itself develops as a response to the increasing pollutant load. So we have a massive role to carry out the de-weeding. Bioremediation is another interesting intervention where we take the wastewater itself as a substrate and the food for its enzymes, develop them and leave it back into the lake or the uh, drain which is upstream of the lake. So for the first principle is, can I improve the water quality upstream of the lake and do less of the activity in the lake itself? And that will be a good idea. So bioremediation is one good measure. The second one has been the thinking the lake area and the constructed wetland. So since you don't have area and we do not have the constructed wetlands, the alternative is to come up with artificial floating island where it is the same plant which through their roots take up the nutrients. you have different kinds of float, and and these are specific plants like canna, phragmites, vetiver, which are aquatic plants which take up the nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and heavy metals through the roots. So the efficiency of this floating islands depend primarily on the ability of the roots to take up these nutrients. So you can see the roots development, and even if you go to a normal lake area, these are native species. You'll find them on the drains, you find them just at the lake
Dr.
entry point.
Kulkarni,
Yes,
you, how much more time would you take? I'm sorry
another
to.
another 3 minutes.
Sure, thank you.
3 minutes. So these are the photos, and this is how the roots develop in a very, very short time. All maintenance we require is to remove them when you'll be able to see some flowers on a polluted water body, and it's a treat to the eye. This is the recent Urkal now, where you have aerators. The small aerators almost impart something like 1.5 lakh liters of oxygen every hour. That is the rate at which oxygen is transferred. They consume very, very less power. They're imported, and they can be fixed. All of them are plug-and-play systems. Whenever you have enough money to build a plant, you could always remove them. So you have different. Some are for aesthetic purpose, and most of them are for imparting oxygen into the water body. Now I come to the last slide, and what is the way ahead, and what do we learn from the past? The first learning is on the ability of the communities, their wisdom, and building trust among them now. Over a period of time, the government's increased involvement in rendering these public services, uh, the first thing to do is to build that trust among all the stakeholders. And if there's something called a Constitutional Amendment, 74th Amendment, which almost came about more than 45 years after we got independence, where we said the local community should be empowered. Just whatever has been intent of that amendment, ward committee, the district planning committee, I think those are something that we need to be seriously looking at. Now, should we restructure water governance? Yes, make the service providers responsible and accountable. The first thing they will need to do is to put their cost, make people know what does it really cost them to render service, and why should we be charging people. And if there has to be a subsidy, then let it be targeted. One water is an emerging concept again. Now we should stop talking and compartmentalizing water, groundwater, bore water, surface. We can actually say one water, look at the use of it, intended use. If you're able to bring that quality to a level of acceptable limits and we're able to use it, and one water word is enough, and that brings a narrative differently. CSR is a unique opportunity where private sector can foster innovation, and we can look at innovative practice. There are three major government schemes which are coming out. Jal Jeevan Mission, where you want to give a tap connection for every household in the country. Atal Bhujal, which is for the water stressed areas which are identified in the country, and doubling farmers' income. All of them will depend on water alone. Sustainable development goals and ecosystem restoration both culminate in 2030. So I'm very keen that next 10 years are extremely critical.
Sure.
And if we have to do something, I think the 10 years we could do
Right.
something very, very great. So I would
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
end my,
Kulkarni.
thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry that I'm being a little impolite, but in due of time, His Highness, can I request you? I'm departing from protocol by requesting you to do this. You've heard this wonderful spectrum of perspectives that he has offered, and truly he took us through the architecture of water in many ways. Would you want to, sort of share some reflections with us in the context of what you said at the beginning of this session?
I mean, it gave us a lot of information to digest, and certainly a lot of the issues coming down, and what no doubt that we have today are, a result of many policies which have come about due to the increased need to consume water as a resource in driving our economy forward. As you said, especially post the Green Revolution and the increase in the requirement of water going forward. And then, of course, in 1991, the economic reforms going ahead, as was mentioned, the requirement, the rights and allocations of water, and what we should take up. I think alongside that, I personally just always am thinking, while the rights and allocations are, of course, very much necessary and we move forward, I think the sensitization for everyone, especially in the rural sphere, especially in those who are unaware is, I think, very much key. I was just observing and wanted to observe. In fact, my own staff here many times when they utilize water at the palace are very sort of lackadaisical, for lack of a better word, when using water. They let it free flow. The tap is flowing when other work is happening without any concern for it. So I think institutions which are bigger like the palace and run huger distinct sensitization of staff, of people utilizing the space that this is water going forward is definitely key. And maybe, again, the government side of things, which is very clear, the idea that they must steer, not row, do their role, or rather do their role, adapt to correctly doing what they should be doing rather than putting their hand into other spheres is, I think, very much key also. All of the above which came by from the lakes, we can see locally as well. Kukra, which we as Mysoreans, many of us are aware, has many species of which are not indigenous to the lake, as well as, of course, the many problems of the sewage coming in and the huge algae problem that they have there. A single issue there, which is hopefully not going to go as bad as the Balandur Lake, but nonetheless, is an issue for us here in Mysore. So definitely conserving the available water resources we have. As Mr. Kulkarni said, recharging our water table, the groundwater, will definitely be key going forward, finding ways to do that, because we have excessively consumed that and tapped into that, as we rightly mentioned, for the last 20 years, which has never been done before. So recharging that will, of course, be very key. And as I mentioned before, we really need to know how this rapid urbanization, how we can sort out and understand that while urbanization is definitely necessary for us to move forward as a country and empower everybody and give everybody the opportunity to do well in life, how we must also take care of our resources so they are available tomorrow as well for our future generations.
Absolutely. Very nice and lovely capture. Thank you so much, Your Highness, for being here with us today. I think Sriram was very perceptive when he said that what you said is not half as important as the fact that you are saying this. And that is the impact that it makes on people. And you can be assured that this set of thoughts that you have shared and that absolutely brilliant exposition from Dr. Kulkarni, so extremely well thought out, will be put on air on YouTube and such by the Brave Jain Memorial Trust. Sriram, can I now request you to see how the Belgaum chapter, is requested to speak and to tell us a little about, their own interactions with Dr. Prem Jain and so on. I think in the next 4 or 5 minutes, we can close out of deference to both these distinguished people here, His Highness being present too, Sriram. You have to unmute.
Thank you, Dr. Kulkarni. A wonderful presentation, very, very informative.
Your network is a challenge there, Sriram. Yeah.
We've just got the Belgaum chapter of the Indian Green Building Council in place. Though they're yet to be inaugurated because of this pandemic, they've already been active and been doing a lot of work. And we have two wonderful gentlemen from Belgaum, Mr. Rajendra Belgamkar, who's the chair of the chapter at the IGBC chapter at Belgaum, and Chaitanya Kulkarni, the co-chair. Mr. Belgamkar is a distinguished academician, been abroad for a very long time, and is a man, a person who's very, very highly respected in Belgaum. Is part of one of the largest educational institutions there. And Chaitanya Kulkarni, incidentally, is the president of Kadai, Karnataka. And
your network is a challenge. We're losing you. Is that right?
Distinguished lecture series. So over to Mr. Rajendra for a few words, and then Chaitanya will speak. Over to you, Rajendra.
Thank you, Mr. Sriram, for the warm words.
I think, yeah.
Sir, before you begin, I just want to welcome both of you. Sorry, I could not recognize. Welcome you, sir. both.
Thank you,
Kulkarni and
Somsekhar.
Mr. Rajendra. Nice to meet you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mr.
Somsekhar.
Somsekhar. Thank you, Mr. Somsekhar. I will be quick. Belgaum is eagerly waiting to have its chapter launched. We got together with IGBC in early 2020, and we were able to facilitate a wonderful MOU between IGBC and VTU so that education about the environment could be part of the syllabus of VTU across its 220 colleges in Karnataka. We were so happy with that. And then came the pandemic, and we have been stopped since, but we are hoping that over the next few weeks, we can get our chapter going. We do intend to be able to deliver a lecture with the association of Dr. Hariharan and announce it in the next few days so that we too can begin this wonderful, wonderful series. And I cannot thank Dr. Kulkarni enough for educating people like me. And the bookend of the comments from His Highness at the beginning, at the end, what a wonderful thing it was for us to absorb. Some plans for our chapter that we hope to begin. We have about half a dozen or more engineering colleges in Belgaum. So to spread the message, we certainly wish to have chapters in each of these colleges. We wish to have many lectures across the city of Belgaum so that this whole movement can be jump-started in Belgaum so that there can be two views. One is a retrospective view of what can be done for buildings that have already been built, what retrofitting can be done to make them green compliant, and also to, with the help of Mr. Chaitanya and Kradai, to also see what can be done for new buildings and make it an economically very viable and attractive proposition for anybody engaging in construction. We are going to talk about the Prem Jain lecture series, memorial lecture series. I would like now Mr. Chaitanya to please tell us a few memories of his when we were fortunate to have Mr. Jain in Belgaum more than a year ago. Over to you, Chaitanya.
Thank you, Raj. Thanks, Sriram, for making part of this lecture series. And this lecture series really takes back me to 2015, when on the 2nd and 3rd of September in 2015, we have hosted the state con, the annual convention of CREDA at Belgavi. So this was the time when Dr. Jain was here at Belgaum, and he addressed us. He was a keynote speaker during that particular inaugural event. And it was a wonderful knowledge series that he shared in around, I think, 40 minutes. We had him 45 minutes. And thanks to Sriram, Dr. Prem Jain was here at Belgaum. And it was really a wonderful event that he was there as a keynote speaker at Belgavi. And I think very next day in the evening, he stayed with us for a day. And Sriram took him to the Ramakrishna Mission, where Swami Vivekananda stayed for 9 days in Belgavi. That is in the year 1892, between 15 to 27 October, in 1892. He was there and he visited the place. He was so happy, when he was there. I think Sriram was personally there, to be with him, that share happiness. And he was so happy when he visited the ashrama there. Thank you. And it was really, thank you for giving us an opportunity to host the 7th memorial lecture in his the thing, and it will be dedicated to him. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sriram, I can't thank you enough for making this happen. We can't be any more grateful than whatever words can express to His Highness for having patiently spent 95 minutes so far being with us, and for not being just one ornamental head of a royal family, but for being a thinking, a person who brings vision, and we hope that with those long decades that's left in front of him, that he will bring us some very extremely insightful scenarios for Bharat. Sriram, you have to see how you can thank him for being here.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll be coming to the concluding remarks, and we call it vote of thanks, but on CI for us we call it as concluding remarks. So we do really thank His Highness Yaduveer for having spent time with us, and also, as Hariharan ji said, imparted so much of Jain to all of us. For all of us here in this program, we had two HHs. For the knowledge of all of you, we all call Hariharan ji as HH. The entire green building movement in India call him as HH. And we also had His Highness, the King, also on the same program. So we had actually two HHs. Both of them are equally, they are very, very dear to us here in Mysore. And great that we had His Highness with us today and having contributed so wonderfully to this. And what a wonderful presentation Dr. Kulkarni gave all of us. So nice, so simple. I think it was something which anybody could understand who was unlettered, could also get to it. It was wonderful, Dr. Kulkarni. We really thank you for your efforts, and we also thank the chair and co-chair of the Belgaum chapter for having been here to carry on the flag. We picked up the flag from Jaipur last time, and we brought it to Mysore, and now you're picking it up from us and carrying it to Belgaum. And I'm sure the next series will be fantastic, and it'll come out very well. We do thank Somshekhar, my chairman of the chapter, for being on this program and having delivered the welcome address. And we do thank Payalji, who is the daughter of our beloved Prem Jain, who is on this program. And she is the person who's really driving this trust. And for all of us, I think, yes, my parting shot is that the great man, Dr. Jain, or what Dr. Jain was, he made India become the #2 country in the world in the green building movement. Definitely, he led that entire movement with such inspiration. But there's something from him, which was something very different, It was his love and dedication for the cause. That is something which we really miss when he's not here with us. And I'm wearing this badge, which is a distinguished fellowship given by the council. And this badge was actually placed here by the beloved Dr. Jain about 4 years ago. And we have always, we always remember you for the great love and your dedication for this moment, and the love for all of us, for every living human being, which you wish to always show. And for the great work you have done and the way you've gone about your life, I'm sure you're in a very, very comfortable place. And the way you left, especially, definitely you're in a very, very comfortable place. And you'll also be part of this program and blessing all of us. So without wasting much time, I think we'll say bye-bye and we'll sign off. The pandemic is still not fully over. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and let us look forward to the next distinguished lecture series from Belgaum. Thank you.
And thanks once again to His Highness for having agreed and for having absolutely been as distinguished as he was in the views and the opinions and the insights that he presented. Dr. Kulkarni also we learned a great deal from you, Dr. Kulkarni. I must say that. Thank you so much to all of you for having been here today. Thanks.
Thank you, His Highness.
Thank
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.